Hi, BMO Nation. Welcome to your podcast on how to create the ideal MCAT study schedule. My name is Veronica Brechkal. I'm a lead admissions expert here at BMO. And today I'm going to guide you through some tips and strategies on how to create that ideal study schedule. So we're going to cover a few things today, and we're going to begin with telling you what your study schedule should include, regardless of the timeline that you're working with. Then we're going to do a review of a comprehensive 6-month study plan. So this is the ideal amount of time that we recommend for students to dedicate to studying for the MCAT. But for those of you with limited time constraints, we also will go over the 3-month, the 1-month, and even a 1-week MCAT study schedule for your reference. So let's begin with topic number 1. What does your MCAT study schedule have to include? So first thing to remember is, of course, to make sure that you aim to be as detailed as possible, right? So not only, of course, is this going to help to keep you organized, but it's also going to help you eliminate anxiety and stress when you're studying for the test, right? It's going to help you to eliminate distractions, and it's going to really help you to prioritize your time and know where to devote your energy, whether it's the sections or specific times of day. Now, when putting together your study schedule, a couple of things that you definitely want to include is time commitment, your MCAT content areas, your resources and study strategies, and you're going to want to think about rest days. So let's take a look at those one by one. So the time commitment portion, as you're planning out your schedule, is absolutely important because, of course, you will have outside commitments that are not related to MCAT prep, right? These might be work obligations, these may be extracurricular activities, maybe other academic activities that are going on in your life. So all of those are going to need to be factored into your schedule as you allocate the right amount of time for your MCAT. So take these into account. And be specific. What days of the week do these activities normally take place if they're set? How many hours do you normally spend on them a day and a week? All of these things are going to help you to know exactly how much time you'll be able to dedicate to the MCAT study. Now, the other thing, and this perhaps is self-evident, but you're going to want to make sure that you know the MCAT content areas that you will need to cover. Now, the first phase of your MCAT prep will be focused on content review. So your schedule must include disciplines and concepts that you're going to want to study, right? So to keep in line with MCAT's format and sections, you can use their content outline as a reference, and then you can fill in this section of your schedule. Now, for the resources and study strategy, so this is perhaps the most important part of your organization and of your schedule planning, right? Because this is where you're going to outline the resources that you're going to be using for your study to fill in the gaps of knowledge that you need to perform well on the MCAT. So here you're going to want to, of course, reference the books that you're going to, or other resources that you're going to reference, but you want to be specific when making your list, right? So what chapters, what videos, are there specific notes from, X course that you're going to need to reference, right? You need to make sure that you have all that organized so that by the time you reach the point of reviewing these, you are able to access them with ease. Now, the last point that we want to make sure to reiterate is that for your MCAT study schedule, regardless of how long it is that you have to study for the MCAT, make sure that you include those rest days, right? This is absolutely crucial. Just giving yourself one day off a week at least to be able to recharge, right? Regenerate. This is absolutely crucial for avoiding burnout, especially closer to the date, by allowing yourself to recharge. So you make sure that you schedule a rest day into your outline. All right, so now let's take a look at what an ideal MCAT schedule will look like if you have the full 6 months to study. All right, now let's take a look at what a comprehensive 6-month MCAT study schedule might look like. So use our guide here as a template for you to create your own. Now, regardless of what yours ends up looking like, make sure that you include check boxes beside each item so that you can mark them as soon as they're completed. This will, of course, help to keep you accountable, and then also you will make sure that you're aware of any subsequent steps that you need to take to ensure that you're progressing through your study. Now, as I mentioned before, make sure that you leave time each week to rest so that you avoid that burnout. Now, also consider enrolling in an MCAT prep course. So if your budget permits this, this is definitely something worth looking into. Having that kind of expert advice or expert guidance on how to study for the MCAT is going to be very beneficial to ensuring that you do well. But you can also see whether your university has any kind of free or low cost programs that can help you study for the MCAT as well. And then the AAMC also offers different resources free of charge, so be sure to check out their website. So let's take a look at the 6-month comprehensive schedule. So what's that going to look like? Now let's start with month 1. This is your first month. Now the first month, week 1, you're going to want to make sure that you get a clear baseline of where it is that you are in your MCAT journey and the areas that you need to work on. So to do this, we want to encourage you to make sure that you take a full-length MCAT diagnostic test. Now, don't worry about trying to do your best here, right? Of course, do your best, but don't worry about getting a perfect score or a high score. This test is really designed to make you see what areas are your stronger ones, and of course, what areas or what content do you need to devote more attention to. Now, for the diagnostic test, we recommend that you use the AAMC full-length practice exams. Those are available online. And when you take them, make sure that you're doing this in a private setting, that you are doing it in one sitting, right? And all of this to ensure that you're mimicking the real test conditions as much as possible. So once you have your baseline in week 1, you're going to want to then create a study outline that includes each of the subjects that you're going to need to study. And here you're going to want to be specific, right? So don't just write down biology, right? Try to break down each content into specific subject areas, right? So for example, cell theory or the nervous system, right? These are going to give you a much more specific approach to tackling each content area of the MCAT that you need to work on. The other thing you're going to want to do in week 1 is gather all that study material, right? So your textbooks, your challenging reading materials for CARS, your review videos, any course notes, and any projects that you might need to touch base on the subject areas. You're going to want to have those handy for when you are studying in subsequent weeks. Now, begin also in the first week developing your CARS strategy. So we can't emphasize this enough, but at the earlier you start to prepare for CARS, the better, because there's no content that you can prepare for, right? There's no content that you can study that will help you excel at CARS. It's a matter of familiarizing yourself with difficult material, challenging texts, and being able to work through those one by one, regardless of what they may be on the day of the exam. So this doesn't need to take a lot of your time in terms of reading that challenging material, but you want to make sure that you are doing it consistently. So dedicating about 30 minutes a day to reading challenging material is something you're going to want to do starting in week 1, right? So consider looking up some humanities or social sciences journals, open up a novel, or begin reading short stories, something like that. Now for week 1 in month 1, we will recommend that you start with something fairly accessible. So why don't you go ahead and pick up a copy of your Vanity Fair magazine and give that a read. So that's week 1, month 1. Now for week 2, you're going to want to continue with the content review. So here you're going to want to focus on biology, biochemistry, and organic chemistry, right? This is going to help you to prepare for the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, which is one of the 4 sections on your MCAT. Now for the challenging read, we recommend picking up a copy of The Economist and going through that. For week 3 of month 1, you're going to want to continue to study in organic chemistry. You're going to want to look at organic chemistry, physics in preparation for the chemical and physical foundation for biological systems section of the MCAT. So in other words, the CP section of the MCAT. That's week 3. And then week 4, this is when you're going to focus on the psychology and sociology prep for the MCAT, so the PS section of the test. And your challenging read for this week is going to be The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. All right, so now you're into month 2, week 1. You have 20 weeks to until your exam day. Where do you start? So month 2, week 1, make sure that you take a full practice exam, right? So CARS and BB sections are going to want to be your focus here. So when you take these, begin a mistake log, right? And this is going to allow you to write down any kind of missed questions along with solutions and key definitions. So this will help you to review. Now, review your log or refer to your log regularly to reinforce concepts moving forward. So if you find yourself missing questions on content that you have already covered, then this is your opportunity to try and determine why. And having that log is definitely going to help you to be able to do that. Another thing you're going to want to create in the first week of the second month is a pop quiz, right? So after you review your mistake log for the practice exams, complete a quiz, create and complete a quiz 2 to 3 days later to see how much you've been able to retain the information that you reviewed a few days prior. Now, the last thing you're going to want to do is, of course, play any catch-up. So if there's any reading material or review that is left over from month 1, the first week of the second month is when you want to make sure that this is all completed. Then weeks 2, 3, and 4, you're going to continue with that content review. So what does that look like? Week 2, you're going to then focus on the BB section of the MCAT. You're going to work on some chemistry questions, and you're going to, of course, continue by reading challenging materials. So in this case, you're going to want to start reading. In our suggestion is Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. In week 3, continue with the content review. This time you're going to focus on the CP section, and you're going to want to finish reading Guns, Germs, and Steel. Now for week 4, continue on to the PS section of the MCAT, and in your ongoing preparation for CARS, this is where you're going to open up The Ever After of Ashwin Rao by Padma Viswanathan, right? So that concludes your first 2 months of your MCAT prep. Now you're entering month 3 and you have 16 weeks to exam days. So what happens in week 1? You're going to continue practicing for the MCAT by writing practice exams, whereas the practice exam that you wrote in month 2 was focused on BB and PS. Here in month 3, you're going to focus on CARS and CP. So you take the practice exams, and then you're going to want to make sure that also by the end of week 1, you catch up on any of the other material that's left over from month 2. So whether that is any error logs that you still need to review, or if there is a reading for your CARS practice that you're still trying to get through, make sure that you're caught up by the beginning of the 3rd month. Now, weeks 2 and 3 are going to be, again, more content review. So for week 2, you're going to focus on BB. In week 3, you're going to focus on CP. And then in week 4, you're going to focus on PS. Now, for challenging reads, consider starting Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie in your 2nd week. Then continue reading that into your 3rd week, and then finish up by opening up The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. A great read, very different from Midnight's Children, but absolutely a great and useful read for thinking about education. So that concludes your first 3 months. Now, what happens now that you're halfway there? Now it's time to really talk about what the latter half of your ideal MCAT study schedule is going to look like. So at month 4, this is when you really begin to transition from content review into MCAT practice questions and more active learning strategies, okay? So continue your mistake log. Don't ever let that go. Make sure that you use it to keep track of questions and content or concepts in which you are struggling. But now focus your time to really reviewing content on the topics that you find yourself missing during practice, right? So although you've now switched to privileging, in a way, answering practice questions, you'll need to make sure you're still learning from your mistakes, right? And careful targeted review is where this practice comes in, right? So take ample time to understand why you missed a question so you can approach your next round of practice with updated information. All right, so you are in month 4, week 1. What are you going to do now? You're going to take a full-length MCAT practice test. You're also going to want to complete a psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior practice test this week. So this is an additional PS practice test. So be careful again and detailed in writing and reviewing your mistake log as you do these practice tests. Now, week 2, you're going to want to focus on practice questions and review, and this is going to be focused on the BB section, but of course you're going to continue your MCAT CARS prep, and you're going to pick up a challenging yet very worthwhile novel by Leo Tolstoy called War and Peace. Week 3, continue with practice questions and review, but this time shift your focus to CP section, and then continue with your Tolstoy novel. Now, at this point, if you have an MCAT prep course in mind, or if it's part of your study plan, then this would be the time to start, right towards the end of your 4th month. Now, for week 4, the last thing you're going to want to do is, again, focus on practice questions and review, but this time dedicate your time and energy to the PS section. And then, since War and Peace is quite a long novel, that's the time that you want to make sure that you get through this novel by. All right, so month 5, 2 months to go, 8 weeks. What do we do? Month 5 is going to be the most demanding, so prepare yourself. It's going to be the most demanding in terms of practice questions and exams, right? Each week in month 5, you're going to want to complete a full-length MCAT practice test, and you're going to want to use the remainder of your study time for highly targeted review and practice, right? You're also going to want to continue with your MCAT prep course if this is something that you're enrolled in. So what does month 5 look like from week to week? In week 1, you're going to do that full-length practice MCAT. You're going to remember to do this, of course, in conditions that mimic the real test environment. We've gone over this, but make sure that you're alone in a private room, that you do this in one sitting, and that you're, of course, undisturbed as you write this test. Now, as you get closer to the actual date of your test, you want to make sure that you're doing all you can to reduce anxiety on exam date, and making sure that you're comfortable with actual testing conditions is going to be a part of that, which is why we advise you to simulate those conditions ahead of time as much as possible. Now, to continue to prepare for the CARS section here, you're going to want to switch from Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace to now perhaps pick up a copy of The Economist and read through that as you continue to work on the full MCAT practice tests. Now, week 2, week 3, and week 4, you're going to do that targeted practice by looking at practice questions and review. For week 2, you're going to focus on BB. For week 3, you're going to focus on CP. And then week 4 is going to be focusing on PS. Now, another full-length practice test is also going to have to be written every single one of those weeks. So again, to reiterate, month 5, 1 month before your MCAT exam in a 6-month schedule, month 5, you're going to want to make sure to do a full-length practice MCAT every single week. That's a lot of MCAT tests, but this is what's going to help you really solidify everything that you've learned and continue to improve your timing and your stress levels, of course, while zooming into any kind of content gaps that you might have. All right, so now you're in month 6. You have 4 weeks to exam date, so you're in the home stretch. And now your ideal MCAT schedule in the last few weeks is going to really look at continuing to focus, of course, on practice questions and exams, and if wrapping up your prep course if you're taking one, but you'll also need to start preparing for the big day, right? And part of that preparation involves keeping calm and resting and recuperating, right? You've just done a lot of months of intense prep, so month 6 is really your opportunity to slow down, right? So what does that look like? So in week 1 of month 6, you're still going to want to take another full-length MCAT practice exam. So you're not slowing down entirely, right? But then you're going to want to subsequently review. So spend some time reviewing your strong content areas, right? So perhaps those that you felt so comfortable with that you may not have looked at for a while. Make sure that you look over them again just to refresh your knowledge, right? For week 2, guess what? Another MCAT practice test. In week 2 of your test prep is a good time to confirm the time of your scheduled MCAT. So exams generally begin in the morning. So keep in mind that if you're a night owl, you should start adjusting your sleep schedule so that you can ensure that you perform your best on the morning of the MCAT, right? So that means starting going to bed a few minutes earlier each night until you've achieved this goal. In week 3, you're going to want to take 2 full-length practice MCATs, right? So the good news is that this is the last time that you're going to have to deal with full exams before your actual test. So take these on separate days. Of course, they're 7.5 hours long, and give yourself the rest day or the rest of the day off as a reward. Then come back the following day to review and clarify anything of which you're unsure. Now, another test day prep is going to involve you making sure that you sleep. So if you've been getting less than 7 hours of sleep, do everything you can to replenish your energy, to make sure that you are getting a full night's rest, right? Now, the week 4, basically the last week before your MCAT, is really going to be there for review. You're no longer writing any practice tests. You're going to want to minimize your studying as well. So really just focus on 3 to 5 topics or subtopics that you've had trouble with recently and review those. Most importantly, don't try to cram. You need to taper your study from several hours at the beginning of the week to just 1 hour per day in the week of your test. Now, if you can't comfortably review a topic in 1 hour or less, then focus on something more manageable instead. Of course, continue your challenging reading material. And one test day prep tip that we have is to be very mindful and conservative about your activities in these final days before the exam. Think about the fact that a well-rested mind will fare far better on a day-long exam than one that's been frantically cramming to the last minute, right? So make sure that you take the day before the test completely off and try not to obsess over whatever uncertainties you may still have. Rest assured that you've put in the work, so now it's your time to shine. And that is your ideal MCAT schedule for a 6-month time frame if you're able to dedicate it. Now, of course, not all of us are able to devote a full 6 months to study for the MCAT full time. So it is very common that students will say take a summer off to study for the MCAT, and that gives them just about a 3-month window where they can fully prepare for the MCAT, and there's definitely strategies that you can apply there as well. So with any kind of study schedule, the first step is to take that diagnostics test. You cannot skip this step because this is where it shows you the content areas that you excel in. It shows you where it is that you need to devote your time and energy to when reviewing. So make sure that you take that diagnostic tests. And then you will still need to review content for each section, right? But of course, your schedule itself is going to be more compressed. So that means that you're going to need to create a rigorous study plan and stick to it firmly. Whereas with the 6-month schedule, you have a little bit of room and a little bit of leeway to catch up on certain weeks if you didn't finish something. With a 3-month schedule, you are locked in. You are locked in and committed to ensure that you have that you're able to make that progress. Now, your schedule must also include reading challenging materials. right? So this goes back to what we talk about in terms of CARS preparation. So make sure that every week and every day you're spending at least 30 minutes a day reading that challenging material. If you could take a little more time or dedicate a little more time to that, that would be great. And then also, of course, during the 3-month preparation, remember to continue to take full-length practice MCAT tests. So ideally, you want to take anywhere between 5 to 7 practice tests to gauge your progress. So that means taking about 1 test every 2 weeks. And then finally, remember to still, just as you do in the 6-month schedule, begin tapering your studying as you approach the MCAT, right? So you should take your last practice test the week before the exam, no later, right? And ensure that you take the day before the test off. This is going to help you, as we discussed, ensure that you are rested for the actual test day itself so you could perform at your best. And so what happens if you only have 1 month to prepare for the MCAT? So this is a challenging feat, but doable. And to successfully prepare in 1 month, you will need to be completely comfortable with the content covered on the MCAT. There's no ifs, ands, or buts with this. Unless you are comfortable with the material, the chances of you performing well on the MCAT, of course, are slim. So perhaps you've taken all of the necessary coursework, and if you haven't, if you feel comfortable in your knowledge, well, that's fantastic, right? And in this case, just as in the 3-month schedule and the 6-month schedule, your first step is still to take that diagnostics test to see where it is that you stand, right? Then you're going to create a list of about 15 to 20 content areas that you need to brush up on and begin to review these topics, right? So it's no longer whole section review, but specific topic review, something that you start doing in about month 3 in the 6-month schedule, right? So for example, if you have 2 biology topics per week plus 3 chemistry topics for a 1-month study schedule, you will need to essentially significantly reduce the amounts of content you cover and the number of challenging texts you read in preparation for the CARS section. There's no other way around that, right? So try to read 1 book per week, perhaps read The Economist daily. Tips like that are going to ensure that you're still continuously prepping in the background for CARS. Now, as you study, continue to take practice tests and set a goal to complete 5 tests before your MCAT date. So here, if it's a month away, that means you're going to be taking 2 tests a week in some cases, or about basically 1 test every week and a half, right? So here, not only will you review concepts and disciplines you already know as you take each practice test, but you will be able to see if your score is improving, right? And whether it's not. Now, it's important to note that this is not a sufficient study plan for most people. That is, 1 month is often not enough. You must be completely ready for the MCAT content to consider the MCAT after only 1 month of studying, right? So remember, only take the test if you feel completely ready, and make sure you take the day before the test off for yourself. All right, BMO Nation, so what happens when you have just 1 week of MCAT prep left? So a 1-week study schedule should include taking a diagnostic exam first. Always take the diagnostic exam first, and especially with 1 week left to go, if you haven't done so already, this is going to be the perfect indication for you as to whether you are ready, whether you're truly prepared, or if you should perhaps consider rescheduling your MCAT. Now, if you're preparing for the MCAT in a short period of time, please note that last-minute crash courses are not helpful, okay? Instead, use practice tests. Use these to pinpoint any weaknesses in specific content areas. Focus your content review in these areas so you're ensuring maximum improvement. And if there are a few concepts that you do not feel completely comfortable with, guess what? Make sure that you study them as much as you can. However, and we have to be realistic here, you will only be able to squeeze 3 to 5 topics into 1 week study plan. So that means you really need to know your content, right? So Think about the fact that also content review will not be reduced in favor of getting ample practice with sample questions and full-length practice tests, right? So that's why we recommend that you use this week to take several practice MCAT tests to ensure that you feel prepared for the format and duration of the exam, and to prove that you're consistently scoring in your desired score range. Now, aim to take the evening before the test off. This we recommend regardless of how many days, weeks, months, or even years that you have to study for your MCAT. This is not the time to try and cram it in. And if you pull a nighter, it's only going to detract from your ability to succeed. When deciding how many months or weeks you will devote to preparing for the MCAT, be honest with yourself. How much time each day can you really set aside for MCAT prep? So also, select a date that will allow you to set yourself up for success. And once you do that, plan your study schedule from there. All right, BMO Nation, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast of how to create the ideal MCAT study schedule. Today, we've gone over 3 different types of schedules you can create, whether it's a 6-month schedule, a 3-month schedule, a 1-month schedule, and we even added in some tips for a 1-week study schedule as well. My name is Veronica. It's been an absolute pleasure guiding you through this podcast, and I hope to see you in the future. Take care.